I wasn't really sure how to start this video, other than the word ribcage. You know, when we think of ribcage, we think of, protects our internal organs, respiration. You know, respiration, our ribs move up, down, and they don't just move up and down because they feel like it. No, we have these muscles in between. You know, something where we learnt, in A-level biology or medicine, in fact. But that's pretty much it. But in this video, I kind of want to explore the physics of these, muscles. They have a reason why the fibers are running in a certain direction, but we never really explore that reason. So I want to try and tackle that today. And it's by a very simple reason. It's called moments. And it's something we've learned before, but it never really comes up again. So let's just jump straight into the anatomy and explore it. Right, ribcage. As you can see here, we just have the ribs. We have a bit of cartilage here, sternum right here, right in the middle, and that's pretty much it I can show you from this angle. I mean, I could rotate it around. So we can see we can follow the vertebrae, and here's T1 right here, T2, T3, and so on until T12. And you can see the ribs attaching from the back, and we'll look at the joints in a bit later. But yeah, it's really hard to demonstrate using a model such as this because, as you can see, everything is immobile, you can't really move it. But instead, we could use these pieces here. We've got two vertebrae and a rib. And what we can do is we can take this T6 vertebrae and this T7 vertebrae and just sandwich them together like so. But what I'm really interested in is on the side of the vertebrae. And there's these little facets. So you can see one facet up here on T6 and another facet here on T7. And what we can do is we can place this rib right in between. And what we create between this demifacet and this part of the rib, like so, or the facet of the rib, is we create a synovial plane joint. But that's not all. At the back, on the posterior side, we can also see that we create a joint here at the back of the rib, quite close to this tubercle right here. But there's names to these joints. The ones that connect to the vertebrae are called the costovertebral joints, and the ones connected at the back is called the costotransverse joint, on the transverse process. So what does this mean for the rib? Actually, it creates a rotational and gliding movement of this rib. So it goes up, and it also goes, around, like a gliding motion, like so. So you go up, down, and a gliding motion. And this actually increases the diameter of our thorax when we breathe in. So if I inspire, the rib goes up and it also goes around to increase that diameter. We know that these ribs don't just move by themselves. That would be quite silly. But instead, we actually have muscles in between these ribs to allow for that movement. So what are they? Let's go have a look. So I think you can just see me underneath his arm, but right now we're looking at the ribs and the muscles. So we can notice the ribs just running across like so. And between the spaces, especially here, between the spaces, we see the intercostal muscles. And that space here is actually known as the intercostal space. If we look right just here, what I'm pointing at superficially is known as the external intercostal muscles. And just deep to that, we can actually see the internal intercostal muscles. And actually deep to that as well, we can actually find the innermost intercostal muscles. And we could have a look if we just open them up. It's a bit of a challenge, but like so, you can see see just right here the innermost intercostal muscles, very deep to it. I'm not sure you can see on the other side as well, but yeah. So we discussed a little bit about the external and internal and innermost intercostal muscles. What we're really focused on is the external and the internal intercostal muscles. Why? Well, it's because the external intercostal muscles, they are the ones that contract when we inspire. But the internal intercostal muscles contract when we expire actively. So let's just demonstrate with cars which direction they run in, because I'm not sure if it was that clear, but let's take this orange piece of card to be external intercostal muscles, and they run kind of like this, like a hand in pocket kind of motion. And then you've got the internal intercostal muscles, and their fibers run deep to it, like so. And they're kind of running in like a upward kind of direction. Like, it's a bit awkward, but it's kind of like, you know, when you take your shirt off, it's like this. So you've got a handed pocket for the external and taking your shirt off for the internal intercostal muscles. So this is kind of like another way to represent it. So I don't know if you can see, but you can see this purple going across like that. Remember, our hands and pockets. And then our blue, that's going in the take the shirt off kind of direction, right? So this way, that's our external intercostal muscles. And the internal intercostal muscles run deep to it. Like, if you just push it down, you can see just, oh, well, I broke his muscle. But yeah, I hope that's another way to show you what it looks like, the fibers. So how come the ribs are gliding and rotating from the back? Why not from the sternum here? I mean, surely, because, you know, actually, this joint here is also a synovial plane joint. But why from the ribs? Well, it's actually because as we come back to it, I talked about how there's like around roughly 2 costovertebral joints and 1 costotransverse joint. That's a lot of capsules. That allows a lot of movement. But here, our sternum, where our sternocostal joint is found, it's just 1 capsule. And it's smaller compared to the ones found at the back. So yeah, now that we know the anatomy, I think we can now actually begin to explore how do moments work. Okay, let's start talking about moments. In this example, we'll use a door. Now, I usually open my doors normally, and the way I open it is from this point here, which is the door handle, which allows me to swing the door open like so. But never in my life have I opened my door from this point here. This just requires too much energy and too much force to swing the door. But why is that the case? Well, bear in mind, the door's joint is found here, which is opposite to the door handle. So therefore, it makes it easier to open it from the door handle compared to the opposite side. And this is because of moments. So let's start exploring a little bit more about these moments. A moment is a rotational effect because of a force applied across a pivot, like so, which means that my moment can be clockwise or it can be anti-clockwise. A moment is calculated by the force times the distance. Now, usually we'll include the angle as well, but we're going to ignore it for now. In this case, we have a seesaw with person A and person B. Person A is much greater and he's furthest away from the pivot, compared to person B, who weighs much less and is closer to the pivot. If we calculate it like so, 10 times 100, which is 1,000, compared to 5 times 50, which is 250, we can find that the clockwise moment is going to be greater than the anti-clockwise moment. So which way is the seesaw going to turn? It's going to turn this way. It's going to go clockwise. So how can we apply this to our muscles? So let's look at our external intercostal muscles. Here we have the vertebrae in blue, we have the sternum in black, and the rib from the top and the bottom. Let's say ribs 3 and 4. Our external intercostal muscles will connect from the top and the bottom. So, how are we going to know the rotational effect of the ribcage when we inspire? So let's have a look. Our muscles are going to contract, and they're going to contract inwards. the force is going to be the same, going up and going down. But if the force is the same, why is the ribcage going up? Well, the bottom rib and its attachment is much greater in distance if we have a look at the vertebrae over here and the point of attachment over here than compared to the top and the bottom, which means that the rotational effect around the vertebrae at the bottom is going to be much greater than compared to the top, which means that our ribcage is going to move upwards because the anti-clockwise moment is greater from here than compared to the clockwise moment from here, which is why our ribcage moves up during inspiration. Okay, what about in expiration? Well, same thing applies. Let's have a look at our internal intercostal muscles. Here, the muscle fibre runs in this direction compared to the external intercostal muscles which ran in the opposite direction. Likewise, the top rib instead is now the greatest away from the vertebrae, like so, than compared to the bottom rib, which means when the muscles contract, even though the force is the same on both sides, the distance is greater. And if the distance is greater from the top than compared to the bottom, the clockwise moment is going to be greater than the anti-clockwise moments. It's really interesting to see how muscles contribute to the moments to the ribs, to go up and to go down. But there are limitations to this explanation. One of them is that, our ribs, they're not 2D, they're 3D. So they curve outwards. We have different separations between the ribs. I mean, this one's broken, but you can see there's different separations between the ribs. And we have so many muscles involved when our ribs go up and down. But one thing I want you to take away is that, our anatomy has explanations, and there's physics involved in it as well. So not everything is just about memorization. There are things to help and understand.